Hi, I'm the Red Mongoose. Welcome back to the shed and to the channel. Today is going to be my session one, so to speak, and we're going to be talking about mimics. And the reason I want to go with mimics is because I've already done some videos on other platforms about mimics. With that being said, though, I have had a few other realizations and ideas I wanted to talk about as well. So I want to do a quick little backtrack, figure out what where we started from and where we're at now. And where we started with this actually comes back to why can't mimics ever be intelligent? Everything you see in most lores and medias are just a treasure box or an item, and they don't communicate. They eat adventurers, and that's it. We never question though as to why there's always an infinite amount of mimics, and as to why they never evolve into a sentient status. If they're able to mimic so many different things and they have organs and so forth, would it not make sense that they could eventually gain a sentience and be able to start communicating to a degree, even if it's at like a low level goblin or something like that? Dissing on the goblins a bit, but you know what I mean. At the same time, my theory is they eventually do, and that's where you get into your like doppelgangers and so forth, or changelings, more precise. As they've eaten adventurers and so forth, they start adopting the ability to mimic a living creature. So then they would start developing vocal cords and intelligence in order to communicate and so forth. And then I got into that same video or same video series, I got into a whole rabbit hole of, well, then what would be the pre-evolved status of them? The pre-evolved status, in my mind, would be slimes, unless they were just made as mimics, which I have something coming up later here that will be discussed in a moment in regards to that. But for the original train of thought that I was running with is they would be slimes if they were naturally occurring, as slimes are something you can actually find in eggs and so forth, but also more importantly, they already are able to split themselves in a molecular level and survive. They operate purely off of instinct, very similar to a mimic. However, it's such a low level atom manipulation and molecule manipulation, they're not able to duplicate things. But as they go to absorb different things and creatures and so forth, they start to learn how to not just split their own atoms as they're breaking down other atoms, but they learn to start duplicating things, and then they start forming into a mimic, and then they realize the greatest source of, for lack of a better term, macros and protein and so forth is going to be adventurers, as they're going to have armor on, they're going to have all the vitamins and minerals a growing mimic needs. And with that, they would then proceed to start turning into chests. And then from there, as the adventurer walks up, fails some observations, opens the chest, and they get eaten. By duplication process, that would rather mean that they would split themselves apart and be able to make other mimics. There's been some ideas tossed around about them being able to reproduce by eggs, by normal reproduction processes, or just separating themselves, having multiple different aspects. But I think that gets a little tricky on what that is. And it's a completely different kind of rabbit hole to go down. I think it's very possible they could have eggs, and then you'd have like a brood of mimics in like a little cavern cave area of your dungeon, as to which you would run into multiple mimics, and then there'd be like a little brood one. You'd have that one that's going to be carrying the eggs, or several of them carrying the eggs, almost like a spider. And then from there, as they would hatch and so forth, they'd really turn to like coins or something easy for them to duplicate, learning from the parents. And then from there, they'd be gathered by adventurers, spread about, and so forth. I really like that idea, and I think it's really cool. But then with that, I mean, I'm kind of like speed running a lot of that. If you over on TikTok and so forth, I have done some videos on that. But as that's been kind of the shortened version of all of those videos, here's the idea I was thinking of. It was a book I was listening to that kind of gave me a weird little idea about it. But with that, the idea was, What if mimics didn't have a pre-evolved status, and the original mimics were made by a god of trickery? So you have a deity, or Cyric, or one of the others that's really big into trickery and lies and deceit. And so to mess with mankind and mortal kind, and even potentially mess with the gods, to have a creature that would then turn into other objects and then go from there to eat them, cause havoc, and so forth. They would stay at this evolved status, potentially gaining sentience to a degree, which is where you would get like an elder mimic that could speak. Like we all like to make the jokes of, oh, tavern is the whole tavern's a mimic. That kind of situation. Turn them into eldritch beings, which was another little fun little side tangent I went off on. Is if you were to run into a like an eldritch elder, a mimic that could communicate, and gave you a little satchel of coins, which was its young, and you became a warlock to said mimic, and that's where you get your powers from, and that's where you would have to spread those coins about as part of your pact. A failure to do so would result in consequences and so forth. That's a really fun thought process of mine running down, but with my thought process of the deities making a deity of trickery and so forth, or what you would end up seeing is they would be able to duplicate potentially in the state of almost like a intellect devourer, right? So an intellect devourer goes off a little tadpole, goes into your brain, splits out, get the little brain guy, and then from there you turn to a mind flayer potentially. Before that, you just get into an intellect devourer. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong with that one. I just realized I said that completely backwards and wrong. Intellect devourers are basically just part of the mind flayer colonies. They're brains with legs and they talk. Well, psychically. Again, tell me how I'm wrong in the comments. I know I just messed all that up. But I really don't feel like going back through and re-recording or editing this. Like I said, I want this to be more of a long form that is a little less filtered, unedited, and so forth. More of just a friendly discussion. So with that being said, what if mimics, upon eating an adventure, saves like the brain or a part of the stomach or whatever it is, and upon affecting it by osmosis, infection, or whatnot. I like the idea of like infection, so it's almost like it ate the entire adventure, but it left like a certain part of it, and it became a mimic as that result. So that organ, whether it's like the stomach, the guts, the brain, or whatever, is preserved. It gets infected by the insides of the mimic, and now it turns into a mimic itself. That organ does, which then is released, and then it goes and turns off as a little bitty chest and starts growing until it becomes a larger chest, potentially gaining sentience, and then from there turning into elder mimics and eldritch mimics and so forth. I mean, it's all speculation, right? There's not really like there's anything out there, but I would really like to know your guys' thoughts on this. I have a whole bunch more I'd like to kind of run into this, I'm sure, but at the exact moment, those are my thoughts. And I figured this was a really good time to take a little pause, as it's hotter than the seven first hells, and the last two. It's getting pretty close to that right now. So I want to take a little pause break here, get these thoughts out, and not have to do it in such a fashion that it's in 30 seconds, minutes, so forth. And I really wanted to play around more with this style and see how it is received. Anyways, you can find me here, of course. You can also find me on TikTok. I'm setting up a few other things that will be put into the description of the channel. I appreciate if you guys made it this far. And by all means, please hop in the comments. Tell me why I'm wrong, why I'm right, what your ideas are, and so forth. I know. I messed up the intellect devourer deal. My brain was scattered on a different one with that. Either way, feel free to go ahead and rant on me on that one too. I can take it. But again, thank you so much for hanging out here with me for a while, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. And you have a wonderful day and a safe upcoming week and 4th of July.